I want to start by talking about an overall framework for outcome-based budgeting that talks about not only how to structure your approach to it, but also then begs a more interesting question of why we do it. Um, and the first component is something I think most of you are familiar with, and that is in this pursuit of outcome-based budgeting, we've talked about how to develop outcomes that you're striving to achieve, um, introduce how to align resources with those outcomes by way of identifying programs, what we call program inventory, and then in some way, shape, or form, scoring or evaluating programs relative to those outcomes. And that is the basic approach to creating an outcome-based budget. So we say that there is a need to create data that probably didn't exist before for any given organization. Most organizations start with line item data. You have a line item budget, and the whole approach to outcome-based budgeting is, at least from our lens, is to introduce what we call a program inventory. We tie the resources to the programs through basic cost allocation. So we're not just talking about line items, but we're talking about what do we use those line items to do to perform, and that is what we call a program inventory. You see in this graphic, I'm trying to illustrate that when we recenter the conversation at what we do, these programs, that's how we can get to an outcome-based budget. We now can tie our line items to the programs and understand what each and every program costs us, as well as revenue recovery. We can continue to tag other pieces of interesting information, that which we call basic program attributes, to the program inventory, where we're exploring anything else you might want to know about that program that might make it a priority or not. For example, we track degree of mandate. So we're scoring programs on how mandated they might be to perform. We're scoring programs on population served, scoring programs on change in demand, and scoring programs on degree of reliance. Are there others who can provide it? This is just, as the name implies, basic information about the program that you might want to know if you're going to make any resource allocation changes. But the punchline is, how does that program influence outcomes that you're striving to accomplish? For that, we also have a formal scoring process in terms of how this gets done, where one, we need the outcomes. We need to know what the organization is hoping to accomplish, why it exists. These tend to be very broad, overarching reasons for an organization's existence as a government: to provide for a safe community for its people, economic vitality, health and well-being, like we see in this environment, transportation and infrastructure, sustainability, all the types of outcomes that really drive why we're in business in the first place. And we're scoring these programs relative to those outcomes. And once we get there, I'll talk about this purple section in just a moment. And I know I'm to a 10-minute presentation. I've already overstayed my welcome here with technology woes. But the point of scoring programs relative to outcomes is that we can then differentiate those that have the greatest degree of alignment with what you're trying to achieve versus other programs that have less alignment. And it's the first effort that we've tried to make to measure the degree of alignment that one city or county or special district has related to its outcomes versus any other. It's a measurement tool. But it begs a simple question, which is, once you measure the degree to which your resources are aligned with your outcomes or not, it begs the question, how do you improve? Just like going to the doctor for a physical, you get great data, which then begs the question, how do I improve my baseline and strive to align resources to outcomes in a better way towards the future? And that is why I've talked about this purple layer. All of this in our mind is to serve a purpose, which is, where should we be going with a program? If it has less to do with outcomes, our direction might be, we want to shrink this program, or we want to outsource it, or we want to bring it to a stop and take those resources and repurpose them elsewhere. If it's a program that has substantial degree of impact on outcomes, we might want to know, would adding resources to this program actually improve our ability to achieve outcomes? So I hope by telling you this, that I'm giving you a value proposition for why you would even embark on this type of measurement, scoring programs relative to outcomes and looking at your budget this way. So this is the data creation, and its impact on unleashing the power of your line item budget is probably one of the best ways to say it. To answer key questions: what programs need more resources for the future? Ideally, those are programs that have a tremendous impact on outcomes. What programs can we do less of? Those are programs probably that have less to do with outcomes and are provided by others, or those that you can bring to a stop. We're trying to nail answers to these very important questions when we have or feel resource scarcity. From the data, we then focus on an insight phase, which is what is the direction we're heading in with any given program that we provide? How do we repurpose our current resources or act entrepreneurially and generate revenue? And all of this to drive the punchline budget recommendations at the end of the day. As I bring my presentation to a close in a very quick snapshot, I wanted to say that by applying this approach and this lens of collecting the data, what do we do? How much does it cost? What do we know about the program in terms of its alignment to outcomes and so on? Looking through the lens of the program's future direction, is it a program that needs to grow? Is it a program from which we can reallocate resources away from in order to fund something else? Or can we generate revenue? The best of our organizations that we've seen go through this work have been able to justifiably and safely reallocate upwards and more than 10% of their operating budget in order to fund new needs, while tax bases have been flat or in some cases decreasing. Why is that important? Because to us, in this environment that we're in COVID, what we're looking at for 2021 with potentially continued economic impact and shortfalls, that we hope that is not leading us to status quo government. Even though budgets might be decreasing, we still have massive new needs that have to get funded. And it's through outcome-based budgeting that we can find the opportunity for repurposing to generate still new resources to fund the new needs that we have.